various
Right,
presidents that
right,
came after
right.
that.
Do you think, looking back, that the call you made back in the 80s to stay in and try to fix it was the right one?
Yeah, I mean, whether we could fix it or not didn't matter. What mattered was that we knew that all of the orchestras would not leave the AF&M. The 802 orchestras were not going to leave the AF&M. The Chicago Orchestra was not going to leave the AF&M. The LA Philharmonic was not going to leave the AF&M. I mean, just to quote a few orchestras.
Right.
And there were many others.
Right.
And the rule was, if you can't get them all to leave, you can't have them split up, because then we'll get played against each other, just like they were doing with Seattle, and trying to play Seattle off against the union orchestras, the managements. It was not only the wisest course, it was the only course. Unless all of them had been willing to leave, there was no way that you could try to leave the orchestras. But that didn't mean that we couldn't run a little smoke and mirrors on the AF&M.
The same question slightly differently. Over the course of your involvement, do you think the trajectory of union AFM ICSOM relationships has improved? Has it gone the right way overall?
It has its ups and its downs. It's not as well. It has its ups and its downs, and I think the current ICSOM chair, tries to stay on good relations with the AF&M, which I think is the right policy. And I don't think that the current Federation president is anti-ICSOM, but he's much more. He has a vision slightly different, I think, than other AF&M presidents. I think sometimes that makes for difficulties. But from what I can tell, the current ICSOM leadership is able to maintain a decent relationship with him, working relationship with him. And of course, we've got symphonic services. It's big now. It's much bigger than it was in the past.
Well, it is smaller than it was actually when you were chair.
Well, yeah.
It has shrunk some.
Yeah, it has shrunk some, but at least it's there, and and it does a lot of really good work. And at least we have our own division like that. And actually, many of the orchestras get along with their local. I mean, they've taken over their local unions.
Milwaukee, I mean.
Right.
And
sure.
I mean, actually, it was interesting at the ICSOM conference. We had a discussion of this, and I said I think there are 4 ICSOM orchestras that the president of the locals in the orchestra. Well, it turned out it was actually 6 or 7 plus a few other key local officers. It surprised me.
Oh yeah.
And I thought I was on top of it.
Oh yeah. No. It's.
And actually, you were once, weren't you?
I was vice president of Local 2 in St. Louis for 4 years. And when we did the whole restructuring of the Federation, we pushed that people should become involved with their local unions and they should run for office, and that especially in the medium and small locals, if they would organize properly, it would not be difficult to get elected.
Right.
And so we pushed that real hard, and it came to fruition. I can remember going to Federation conventions and in the early years, and it would just be me and the ICSOM people that I brought with me. And then by the time I had left, it was me and a bunch of local officers who were also ICSOM orchestra personnel, and in some cases ICSOM officers. Dave Angus, was one. I mean, he was the president of ICSOM, and he was also the president of the Rochester local.
And still is.
And still is.
That's right.
So it had changed rather radically. It was kind of like the inmates taking over the asylum.
Right.
So we've seen some big changes. The problem is when I became involved with ICSOM in 1975. The membership of the Federation was over 300,000. Now the membership of the Federation, a real count, not the count that they like to use, where they count people 2 and 3 times, But a real count would probably show that the Federation is down to 50, 60,000 members, maybe less.
I've heard, yeah, somewhere between that and 70,
Right.
but probably no more than that.
Yeah, and as you know, the overwhelming majority of those are part-time players.
Although, of course, back when you were, I mean, it was a much higher majority because the people that left were the part-time players, not the symphonic players, not the full-time musicians.
Well, a lot of those people were full-time players. I mean, what happened?
Even the 300,000?
Yeah,
So, really?
yeah, sure. They were all playing bar mitzvahs and weddings and what caused the Federation to lose memberships was they lost that big lawsuit with the booking agencies, where the booking agencies were requiring the musicians to join the union, and then they got tired of it and they took the AFM to court and won. And once they would not require those people to join the union, they didn't join the union because they said, "Why should I join the union? The booking agent takes care of me."
Right.
So I made a graph up of that when I was chairman in 92. I think it was 92. I had to make a point to the AFM convention, and I made a graph, and it was startling. I mean, the way you could watch the drop in membership even then. Right. So, it's going to be it's really turning into a union of haves and have-nots, and that's going to tear the union apart.
Yeah. As I indicated earlier, I think Brad is probably the person on the union side with the longest history with symphonic media negotiations going back to, as you said, 75.
Right.
And being part of AV. And in fact, the last major negotiation you did was in 2001, 2002. It was a revision of AV.
Well, yeah, it was a revision. Yeah, that's right. It was a revision of AV because that was after the Internet agreement.
But,
right?
Between those two, you had many phono labor negotiations and, of course, the Internet agreement, which we worked on in 99.
Right.
The symphonic media business changed pretty radically in that time frame.
Yes, it did.
A lot of which I learned about from you, but why don't you describe that?
Yeah, well, okay. The symphonic media business was never never huge in the United States. It was big in a few areas. For years, Philadelphia basically ran the orchestra off of record royalties. A lot of people don't know that. And, so it made our job, pretty easy. All we had to do was go in and represent what what the players wanted and just pretty much preserve the status quo and make it possible for people to record. As you know, also in that time, the media guarantee really took off. So orchestras were established.
If I recall correctly, that was an invention of someone in St. Louis, was it not? Or
well, yeah, I probably wrote the first media guarantee. Right. Although the idea of a guarantee was actually invented by the Philadelphia Orchestra back in the 50s, interestingly enough. Yeah, they were, at that time, the Philadelphia Orchestra did an enormous amount of recording, and they got pretty unhappy because they would go in and play a concert on Saturday night, and then on Sunday they'd record whatever they played on Saturday night, but with only 3/4 of the orchestra. And
not including all the people at Ormond who didn't happen to like that week, of course.
And of course not including So it was the favored few got to do the recording on Sunday, which is where the money was. And in those days, I think the Philadelphia Orchestra made $60 a week was what they were paid. And so they got a little miffed about that. Plus, you had then the tuba player and other people like that who weren't always used on the recording sessions. So they went in and demanded a recording guarantee because they wanted it so that everybody could get a taste of the recording money. And they were actually the first ones to do a recording guarantee, and they demanded it. It wasn't the management. That was a switch from what happened then 20 years later when managements were demanding media guarantees. But yeah, in the early 70s, the manager of the St. Louis Orchestra knew that he needed, I love these figures when I think about them, he needed to increase our pay $20 a year, not $15. So It was $20 a
A
week.
week, right,
Yeah,
okay.
$20 a week, not 15 a